I thank you for coming on to the No Fruit Podcast. Today we have this gentleman. He wears many, many hats. He's an author, he's a ghostwriter, he's a speaker, he's a counselor, he's a life coach, and a podcast host. Um, his passion lies in unraveling the mysteries of love and relationships and digging deep into what makes us, any of us, tick. And he firmly believes that healthy relationships are the cornerstone of a fulfilling life and career. And he loves sharing insights that resonate with the audiences, whether it's us, as you know, as we're in this podcast, shooting this podcast together, or those of you that are listening out there in the world. So we thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be right back after this.
Let's talk about love and marriage the way that God intended. Life experience, here we share it. The No Fruit Podcast. Tune in from any platform. No Fruit Podcast. We'll help your spirit transform.
So we have none other than Dr. Mark A. Hicks. Now, Mark, I did some research on you. The only reason why you want to use doctor is because of what?
Yeah, in my normal life, I just go by Mark.
Right.
I'm a pretty casual guy, but my book actually has the name Dr. Mark A. Hicks on there, so I formally get introduced that way, so everybody knows it. And my website is markahicks.com.
Right.
I always got to get that middle initial in
Right.
there. So yeah, formally I go by that, so everybody can get to my website, find my book, but I'm just Mark.
Right.
We're glad to have you here today, Mark.
Most definitely.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Most definitely. So as we spoke about in the green room, you know, we kind of want to talk about just family dysfunction at the root, right?
Just get right to it.
Just, you know, family dysfunction. And how do we deal with that, you know, as a kid when we're growing up in it, we don't know there's really dysfunction, right? And now we bring it into our places of relationship, and relationship not necessarily from a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, marriage space, but even in our career relationships, those dysfunctions can grow. So first of all, how do we even recognize that we are in a dysfunctional situation?
Well, I think one of the things we can say just honestly is on some level, all of us came from a dysfunctional relationship in our family.
Right.
Some are more functional than others.
Right.
Some are greatly blessed. And I'll say I was blessed to have a loving parents that were good to each other, good to me and my sister, had a basically functional household. However, no matter what family you come from, even if it works, you have your own particular brand of odd and quirky and weird, and it doesn't necessarily translate into the world. For example, while I came from a very healthy family, when I got into the world, I was extremely naive. I didn't know a lot about relationships outside of my own family and, you know, friends growing up and things like that. And because I didn't quite understand manipulation and toxic relationships, I didn't grow up with that. I ended up in a toxic first marriage when I was young, and it was a terrible experience. Ended in divorce. Still have the emotional scars for that one. And so even if you come from a healthy family, you still have a lot to learn. The world of relationships can still be a mystery for you, and that's best case scenario. From there, we do get into toxic relationships, abusive relationships. So when you say, how do we recognize it? I think a good place to start is just recognize on some level, let's just admit, all our families were kind of warped. All our families had issues of some kind that we need to just be honest enough to work through. Some will have more than others. But the problem is, as you mentioned, when we grow up, we just accept whatever that there is there as normal.
Right.
And so let's just start by just stepping back and saying, okay, I'm going to accept my family had its own brand of weird, and maybe they were toxic, maybe they were abusive, and I really need to address that, because if you want to have a healthy life and healthy relationships, you've got to address that.
That's good. Yeah, I think, you know, whenever you take my crazy and somebody else's crazy and you try to put them together, you know,
Yes.
it can make a whole lot of a mess. And I think that's important. So you said your first relationship was, toxic. So tell us like a little bit about that. How did you, not only recognize it, but what did you do about it and how did things get better?
Well, I recognized it early on.
Mm-hmm.
I realized early in that relationship this was a huge mistake. I had, kind of ignored some red flags that I could look back on and see. Out of just being a naive kid, I just didn't
Mm.
Right.
know, and so it was really early on. I recognized I was in huge trouble. However, at that particular point in my life, there were a few factors. One, I was embarrassed to say that I had made a mistake to
Right.
get married.
Mm.
I had an ego that
Mm-hmm.
said I will
Mhm.
not fail at this, that I
Mhm.
will fix this. I will be smart enough and wise enough and strong enough and insightful enough and whatever enough that I will fix this. It was all ego. It
Mhm.
was all a matter of not wanting to be embarrassed. And I also come from a religious background.
Mhm.
And I was taught growing up that divorce wasn't an option. And I
Yeah.
believed that. I
Mm-hmm.
believed that you do go into marriage with a full commitment to live out your life as a married couple, and I believed that, and I was willing to sacrifice to make that happen, and I
Mm.
did that for a long time,
Mhm.
13 years to be exact,
Wow.
and that drained me to the point I didn't want to live anymore. I
Really?
was I was never actively suicidal, but I was so drained from that toxic relationship after so many years
Mm-hmm.
that I knew that I either had to divorce or I had to die. I could
Mm.
not. I literally could not go further
Yeah.
after 13 years of carrying that and just being driven by ego and embarrassment and fear and
Mm.
all the other things that
Right. Right.
drove me. I It was such a load to carry that I was just spent. I was empty,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
and I knew that was my choices. That I could not live like this anymore. And
Mhm.
so I finally just faced my fears and put my ego aside and got divorced.
Mhm.
And best thing I ever did, because it gave me a chance to start over,
Yeah.
and it also gave me a chance to wrestle with some very powerful questions like,
Mhm.
is love even possible?
Mm.
Is it just a fantasy? Is it just something we talk about and we, have love songs about and
Mhm.
rom-com movies? But
Right.
is it in real life? Is it real? And I was questioning that because in my experience, through that, I thought maybe this is just a fantasy we make up, but it doesn't exist in the real world. And
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of other couples out there that are struggling. I
Right.
wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of couples struggling. I thought maybe it doesn't really exist. And from those questions, and then also from my professional career, because I do have a master's degree in
Mhm.
counseling, and I do have a background in theology
Mhm.
and ministry and
Yes.
spirituality. And so in counseling, we deal with relationships,
Mm-hmm.
relationship with yourself, relationship with others. In theology, we deal with relationship with
Mhm.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
relationship with others, relationship with God. And so from those questions of my own very rocky background, not knowing everything I know now when I was young,
Mhm.
and from my counseling perspective and from my theological perspective, all that kind of converged into this place I am now of believing that not only is love possible,
Mm-hmm.
everyone can learn it. It is
Mhm.
a learned skill set. We learn some of it in our we learn some of it in our families if we come from healthy families. Maybe we don't learn any of it in our
Mhm.
family if we come from abusive families, but it is a learned skill set that everyone can learn. And that's why I've written my book, Learning Love. In that book, I teach 5 components of love that anyone can learn. They're very practical. It's real life, real tangible, practical ways to conceptualize how do we practice love in our life. And as you mentioned, this is not just about marriage or
Mhm.
family. It's also how do we practice connections and relationships at work, in
Right.
our neighborhoods, in churches, in civic organizations,
Mhm.
everywhere in life. It's all about relationships.
Yeah.
Most definitely. So here's my question though, because you're speaking about ego and all these type of things, right? Getting out of this particular situation. In your case, being marriage, right?
Mhm.
So how do you take the mindset on to even consider that, especially if you're saying, "Hey, I grew up in this situation. I believe I had the perfect example in front of me." Because that could be an added level of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so now you're trying to live up to someone else's expectation that wasn't even technically put on you. We kind of put it on ourselves, but because we see the example, right? So how do
Yeah.
you even acknowledge that and work through that level of expectation that's unfortunately is kind of put in front of us?
It is. I think we really do need to be more open to say some relationships just have to end.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No one was put on this earth to be abused.
Mm-hmm.
That is never someone's destiny. Never is that someone's purpose in life to be the subject of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why we're here. And so people sometimes are surprised to hear me say that because I am a counselor. I am a theologian. I come from a spiritual background. I come from a religious background, and I'm a relationship coach that
Right.
wrote a book about how to have relationships. And so people assume I'm going to say every relationship can be saved.
Right.
Theoretically, if we want to save that relationship, we practice things like the 5 components of love that I teach in my book. We practice the art of and the practice of love. We we are diligent about that. Theoretically, yes, every
Mm-hmm.
relationship I believe can be saved, but we're not living in a theoretical world. In reality, there are toxic people, there are abusive people, and some relationships have to end.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to say that more openly because
Mm.
you can only have healthy relationships if you make room for them.
Right.
Toxic and abusive relationships are so draining. Not only do they consume a lot of your life, they squeeze out other potentially healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have healthy relationships and toxic relationships really at the same time because the toxic ones will push out the others.
Mm-hmm.
It will drain you from being able to really connect with the others. If you want to have healthy relationships, you have to make room by making very tough decisions sometimes to end or to limit unhealthy relationships. If you have a solid marriage and you're building a healthy life together, but you came from an unhealthy background,
Mm-hmm.
you might need to limit that that exposure to your family of origin in order to really focus on that healthy marriage that you're building.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be said out loud, and I think it's not said enough.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
think it's tough for people to, as Maurice like to say, look in the mirror and see that,
Hmm.
um, and to recognize
Yeah.
it. And I think, I'm so happy you're saying some of this because it lends itself so true to our podcast and the No Fruit podcast. I think in
Mm-hmm.
our marriages, a lot of times what you're saying is that sometimes you're not fruitful. Sometimes you feel like it's not growing, and you do have to stop and prune some things away,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
cut
Mm-hmm.
some things off, so
Yeah.
that it can grow. And I think that's what you're telling us, that you do have to kind of stop, even in a traumatic situation, like address what the trauma is and move
Mm.
forward. So, and sometimes that is talking with your spouse or someone in your relationship with, or sometimes it's with dealing with your past and what that traumatic issue was. So, talk to us a little bit more like how do you, move forward in this process?
The best thing I can say, if you know that you've got things to work on, you've got to improve your relationships, or you need to overcome something in the past in order to have healthy relationships, and particularly if you're coming to grips with the idea that you came from a dysfunctional, toxic, or an abusive family background as a child,
Mm-hmm.
get help.
Mm-hmm.
Do not try to do that alone. Everyone needs to get help with that. I'm a believer that is good for everyone because
Right.
life's just hard.
Yeah.
Life is just tough. And especially if you know you've got a task in front of you to overcome your past in order to build healthy relationships, get a counselor,
Mm-hmm.
find a relationship coach, get a life coach, find a therapist, somebody that can help you with that. Because if you had a physical ailment,
Mm-hmm.
you would go to a doctor.
Yes.
If you had a toothache, you'd go to a dentist. If your
Right.
car wasn't running correctly, you would go to a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
You would call a plumber. You would call a lawyer. There's any number of professions that we use at every aspect of our life to make sure that we keep things on track.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we do anything less with our emotional and mental health in order to have healthy relationships that will help not only build our happiness in life, our health in life, that will support us, that we can have connections and help our career because we know how to build friendships and
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
connections and co-working relationships. If we will prioritize our mental and emotional health and get help overcoming those things of the past that are holding us back, that have hurt us, that have left those emotional scars,
Hmm.
get help with that. You would seek help from any other professional in any other area, most likely. Do the same when you're trying to overcome difficult past
Yeah.
relationships.
So, Mark, you said that you had a burning question, during your marriage, after your marriage, and things like that. And so it seemed like you might have gone out and hired, Shaggy and Scooby Doo to solve this mystery, this thing called love. Did you ever solve the case? Did y'all ever, did Thelma, and Daphne and everybody else, did they help you out? Were you able to understand, what this thing called love really is?
I really believe that I have come to that place. Yeah, that's why I wrote the book. When I started getting these insights, I knew this is something I had to write.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Because yeah, I really believe that these five components of love that I've referred to are the basic components that we can conceptualize what love is and how to practice it.
Hmm.
That we can look at these five components and see, okay, these come pretty natural to me. And if you were
Mm.
raised in a healthy family, you might have one or two or three, maybe four of these components that you learned before you even knew you learned it because
Mhm,
it
Hmm.
just came natural in your family. But
mhm,
then, even in healthy relationships, you might say something just seems to be missing. And that's where these components come in that I teach because you can look and say, it may just be this one.
mhm, mhm,
Maybe we're doing four of them correctly and we got a pretty good relationship, but something's missing. And we don't have to just wander aimlessly wondering what that is. We can look at these five components and say, this is the area that's not quite working well. And if you came from a dysfunctional family, you may
mhm,
have learned none of them.
Mm.
mhm,
But the good news is they are learnable. They
mhm,
that love is a learned skill set. And so that's why I'm so excited to kind of conceptualize love. Part of it is emotion. One of the
mhm,
second component of love that I teach in the book is emotion. I'm not dismissing it. This is not clinical.
Right.
mhm.
Emotion is a big part of it.
Hmm.
Those emotional connections, that the whole bubblegum and butterflies, sweet and beautiful everywhere.
Yes.
That's
Right, right.
all good stuff. That is a valuable foundational element, component of love.
Hmm.
But that's what I list as the second component. There's four others.
Wow.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so sometimes we've turned love into this rom com where everything's sweet and beautiful, and we
Hmm.
write love songs and we have poems. But when you've come from a dysfunctional family, you've been through a divorce, you've been through trauma, you've been through heartbreak, you need more than a song.
Right.
And that's what I want to provide. I want to provide real conceptual, down to earth teaching that says this is what love is, this is how it can be practiced in a real tangible way by understanding these are the five components to look at in your life, see which ones are working well, and see which ones we need to be working on.
Mark, you really want us to touch on this thing, man. Like, finding these five components that's really going to work. But, it kind of goes against, my reputation. It goes against how I am viewed in the community. I have this lifestyle, and you talking about getting divorced, and guess what? That goes against what we want the church to know, right?
Yeah.
Those type of things. So how do I get over what I want my real image to be like, or what I want the um, family tradition and all these things that we try to live up to? Because beyond just our
Yep.
parents, having this example, but now we have this community space. Because you said you're in ministry, you're in church.
Yep.
Sometimes the
Yep.
pastor is very frowned upon getting a divorce, right?
Right. Yeah.
If I serve in a board, I can't do this. I'm in a parking lot ministry, whatever it is. So how do I
Right.
deal with these other outside entities that won't allow me to let go and
Yeah.
find out who I really am as I continue to look in this mirror?
It's so easy to judge others, and we have so much judgment in the world. And if you want to solve a problem, ask anybody on earth because everybody can fix everybody else's
Hmm.
problems.
Right.
We can't fix our own, but we can fix everybody else's. One of the aspects, when I say the five components of love, what I list as the four components, and they're not in any particular order; they're all five
Hmm.
important. But what I list as the fourth component is loving yourself,
Hmm.
accepting yourself. And that is accepting that we all have flaws. We've made mistakes. We're
Hmm.
not going to be perfect, but that doesn't define who we are. That we need to learn our inherent exquisite value
Mm.
as a human being, as a creation of God, or maybe some people have other ideas about that, but whatever origin story you have, if you believe that we come from a God that created us, that's an amazing story. That's an
Mm-hmm.
amazing
Mhm.
idea
Mhm.
that a loving God would create us on purpose. If you believe that we came from billions and billions and billions of years of evolution to not only exist, but be able to exist as a species
Mm-hmm.
that can love and can laugh and can
Mm-hmm.
connect, that's still an amazing origin story.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Now, people may argue back and forth over it, but regardless of your origin, whatever you believe, we have an amazing origin story, and we are amazing creatures as human beings. But we are flawed in so many ways because we're human, because we live in this world that's all messed up, and we make mistakes, and people do things that hurt us, maybe
Mhm.
accidentally, maybe on purpose, and stuff just happens.
Right.
Mhm.
We have to get to the place that we understand our inherent value
Mm-hmm.
as a human being. And the way I like to illustrate this, let's imagine just for a moment that I have in my hand a diamond the size of a baseball
Mm.
that's perfectly cut, perfectly clear, exquisite in every way. That's utterly priceless.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we take that diamond out into a rural area to the farmland and we roll it around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure and we bring it back in, it's still priceless
Mm-hmm.
if you know what it is.
Yeah.
Now, if you just look at the outside, you think it's worthless because it's
Mhm.
just nasty. But if you understand what's in there, what that is, you don't care how nasty it looks on the outside. You know you want it because of how valuable it is. And that's why we have to learn to see
Mm.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we can learn to see ourselves that way, that we are inherently valuable. And yes, we make mistakes. And yes, we're going to fall short of other people's expectations. And yes, we're going to fall short of our own
Mhm.
expectations. And
Mhm.
we're going to get judged by people that put themselves in a place to think they can judge us. But at the end of the day, we are human beings of exquisite value, of that
Mm.
perfect, priceless diamond that looks pretty rough because we've been through some rough times and things have happened to us and we've made mistakes.
Right.
But the job of psychology and counseling is to clean up all that, to
Mhm.
learn how exquisite we are under all that stuff of life. The job of religion and faith and spirituality is
Mm-hmm.
to clean up that stuff
Mhm.
and see past the mistakes of life and see our value. The job of philosophy is to clean off all that stuff
Yeah.
Right,
and see
right.
what we are past the mistakes of life and the stuff of life and understand our value. So many
Mhm.
of these lines of thought and thinking are about understanding our value. And when we
Mm-hmm.
can do that, when we
Mhm.
see that, what somebody might say about us is their stuff.
Right.
That's their stuff they've been through that's led them to that place. That's not who they are. That's not who we are when we understand our inherent value. That's a journey to
Right.
overcome the mindset of being worthless, to have self loathing. But if we want to love other people,
Mm-hmm.
we have to love ourselves first. Brene Brown's done some brilliant research on
Mhm.
this. Other people have as well. She's very noted for it, but others
Mhm.
have as well. And she's written great. She's written beautifully about this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the capacity to love other people more than we love ourselves. So when we accept all that judgment and criticism that you're talking about there in the question,
Mm-hmm.
we accept that for ourselves and we put ourselves down. All we're doing is keeping ourselves from loving other people to the extent we could.
Right.
If we
Wow.
learn to love ourselves first, we can learn to love others. That's why the
Mhm.
great
Amazing.
teacher
Yeah.
of Jesus Christ said, "Love
Love
your
your
neighbor
neighbor.
as yourself."
Mhm.
Mhm.
Now, if we had the capacity to love our neighbor more than that, why would he lowball it?
Right.
Why would he
Right.
say, you can love your neighbor more than you love yourself, but don't bother?
Mm-hmm.
No, he understood what Brene Brown was able to prove in psychological research
Mhm.
Mm.
centuries later, that we don't have the capacity to love more than we love ourselves. Love ourselves first, we increase the capacity to love others.
Right.
Wow, Mark. Hey man, you said a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. But so one last thing, for those individuals that are listening and they found themselves, taking that diamond and like you said, putting it in the dirt. Because a lot of times we take it and we buried our talents, quote unquote. If y'all understand what I'm talking about, y'all know.
Mhm.
So but we take it and bury it, or we go hide it underneath a bush, whatever it might be.
Yep. Yep.
Where can they reach out and talk to you on how to uncover, recover whatever they might have lost in this place where they might find themselves in?
go to my website. It's markahicks.com. Make sure to get my middle initial in there. markahicks.com. Hicks is Hicks. Go to my website. I have a contact form there. I'm available to be a speaker, workshop leader. I'm available to do coaching. You can also get a link there. My book comes out in June of 2025. As we record this today, it is available for pre-order, and I have links on my website that you can easily get to pre-order the book. I also have a free ebook that is the 5 components of love that I keep referring to. I'll give you a brief overview of what all 5 of those components are. That's completely free. Just go to my website and you can get all of that, plus links to my podcast. And you can just contact me and let me know that you saw me on the show today. I would love to hear from
Great.
folks.
Yes.
Cool. So, but Mark, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes, definitely.
But we do have one last question.
I have one last question. You've shared so
Okay.
much about your story, your background, and it's been really, really great. But the one thing I kind of missed, or maybe you said it, maybe you didn't, but the one thing I do want to ask is, if you could sing a duet with anyone in the world, Mark, who would you sing that duet with, living or deceased?
Oh my goodness.
It doesn't have to
You
be
know,
a love song, whatever you want.
Wow. I am a bit of a singer. I've done some semi-professional singing
Oh,
in my
wonderful.
day. So,
Nice.
so I have done some duets with some amazing singers, but no one famous.
Okay.
Wow. Probably I don't know that I have the quality to keep up, but it would I know she has some health issues now, but Celine Dion has
Okay, yes,
Mm.
yes.
the most amazing voice, particularly
Mhm.
before she had her health problems.
Yeah.
If we could go back to her in her prime, if I could sing with someone of that nature, that would be that would be an amazing moment.
That's beautiful.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
Nice.
Wonderful.
You like the way we set that question up for you?
That was great. That was great.
Had you a little stumped there, a little bit, but
That's
yes,
a tough one. That's a good question.
yes. We like that
But
question.
we thank you for being a good sport with it as
Yes.
well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Y'all are a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this a lot.
That's good.
Thank you
That's
so
good, Mark.
much.
But we appreciate you coming on.
And all of Mark's information will be in our show notes.
Most
So
definitely.
please, you'll be able to find links to his
Books.
website and his books, and all those things will be there for you.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. We appreciate you.
Thanks everyone
Thank
for
you.
listening.
My pleasure.
Sure. And we will thank you for listening to the No Fruit Podcast, and we will talk to you a little later.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the No Fruit Podcast, where we bring you fruitful conversations, ripened wisdom, and love that's deeply rooted. We hope today's discussion left you feeling uplifted, encouraged, and ready to take on life's journey with purpose. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration in their day. You can catch up on past episodes, send us your thoughts, or learn more about us on social media. Until next time, stay rooted in love, and remember, every seed you plant today shapes the fruit of tomorrow. Take care, and we'll see you next time.